We love the 90s. You probably weren't born then, but we totally were. Tell your mom we said hi. So before the FSP genre was called the FPS genre, it was called the Doom clone era, because everyone was copying the massive success of Doom in '93, and everyone, including probably your dad, played it. Tell your dad I said hey. Look at this sexy shit. Look how good it looks. Aren't you excited to get your hands on a remake from a game from 13 years ago? This upcoming re-envisioning of Modern Warfare 2 looks like it will satisfy the warmongering gun nut that lives deep inside of all of us with its completely overhauled graphics and brand new features. Oh, violence. Sweet, sweet violence. But this video isn't about that. It's about this. This pile of shit is called Heretic, and without it, this sick new Call of Duty game might not even exist. You see, the early 90s were a wild time. We had slap bracelets, and people forced us to dance the Macarena even if we didn't want to. And we had the Rachel, in addition to some of the most influential video games ever created. We're talking Fire Emblem, Sonic the Hedgehog, and motherfucking Dr. Mario. What we didn't have, however, were many first-person shooters, because the genre didn't even exist yet out of a few barely worth mentioning games that I will not mention here. It wasn't until 1992 that id Software and everyone's favorite programming wunderkind Stephen King impersonator John Carmack devised a way to make a 2D world appear as if it were 3D, with a rendering method called ray casting. No, not ray tracing. That's the thing Nvidia stuffs into all their GPUs to make them extra expensive. Instead of making things shiny like ray tracing, ray casting fools our stupid eyes into thinking that there's more depth to an image than there actually is by rendering 2D images closer or farther away from the, quote, camera's perspective. In the case of FPS, that perspective, of course, is the character's field of vision. Using that method, Carmack and crew created Wolfenstein 3D, and later the original Doom. These games are considered by many to be the progenitors of the FPS genre, despite how terrible they look now. Because of how the game's visuals are rendered, you can't even look up in either game, like a dog. No, seriously, dogs can't look up. Google it, it's true. With two more or less revolutionary but shitty-looking games under their belt, a certain developer caught the eye of id Software. Raven Software had just released their debut game Black Crypt, which was a 2D dungeon crawler that came on 3 880K discs and was made up of a whopping 32 different colors. At the time, it was visually impressive, and it led Raven being given a modified version of the Wolfenstein 3D engine to use for their next game, which also impressed id enough to convince the developer to give Raven the true keys to the kingdom, the Doom engine. With that final piece of the puzzle, we can finally talk about the game that set the FPS genre on the trajectory to awesomeness, Heretic. Raven Software, being as skilled and capable as the much more established id Software, made several changes to the Doom engine that all but embarrassed id. Check this shit out. Quoth the Raven, "You can look up and down now." That's right, the dog-like limitations of vertical camera movement had been solved by Raven, though in a tricky way. The camera itself didn't move, the game just rendered the world up or down depending on player input. It also had interactive environments that would push the player with wind or water effects. Did I mention that the 90s were a weird time? Well, if you need more evidence, the original version of Heretic was only available as shareware, which means that you had to register your address and the game would be sent to you for free. How bizarre, right? Imagine the next Call of Duty game being sent to your house for free. See what I mean? It was a weird time. Now, you see, Heretic is just Doom, but it's fantasy Doom, which makes it cooler. Players would navigate different levels, battling enemies with elven wands, ethereal crossbows, and whatever this is. Outside of that strangely suggestive melee attack, Heretic was well received, having shipped over 1 million copies by 1997, just a few short years after the retail version became available. The absolutely metal title of Heretic, Shadow of the Serpent Riders, was successful enough to justify a somewhat strange franchise of games, with the sequel, Hexen Beyond Heretic, being released just over a year later. Hold on, what? Why would you immediately change the name of your franchise with the second game, but still decide to include that word in the subtitle? That's like if God of War Ragnarok was titled Loki, Son of God of War. It's terrible. Also spoilers. A third game, Hexen 2, was 2 years after that. Then in 1998, we were graced with Heretic 2? Who's in charge of naming these games? Xbox? Oh, wait. For all of its terrible naming conventions, the Heretic series is actually a surprisingly important part of video game history. Each successive entry made important, evolutionary changes to the game engine it was built upon, thrusting forth the technology that would become the basis of future games. It's not a long shot to say, as I said too, that Modern Warfare 2 might very well have not existed without Raven Software's work on the Heretic series. And to bring things full circle, Raven has actually been working on the Call of Duty series as far back as 2010's Call of Duty Black Ops, and as recently as the upcoming Modern Warfare 2 remake and Warzone 2.0. The legendary studio's legacy goes from the inception of the genre all the way up to the nearly perfected modern incarnation of it. So the next time you're dropping into a match in Warzone, enjoying gameplay tighter than Larry Ernest Blackman's codpiece and incredible graphics, take a second to think about that awkward melee attack in Heretic. Things might be very different if it never existed. What is your favorite 90s FPS shooter? Let us know in the comments so we know that you're old as shit, but as always, be nice. And while you're here, why don't you check out why we thought The Last of Us Part 1 is totally a remaster and not a remake, because we totally need your ad revenue. I'm Mike Golczynski, and I'll see you in the next video.